welcome to Jung at Harp. My name is Deborah Henson-Conant, and this is Kathleen Wiley. Today we are going to talk about how to value yourself. We're going to be exploring this. And I am a composer and a performer, and Kathleen Wiley is a Jungian psychoanalyst, and we both play the harp, and so we call this Jung at Harp. And every week we pick a subject that we are interested in exploring, and we explore it together. And we are now, I think we're streaming live over a couple of different channels. So if you chat to us, we think we can see that chat, and we think we can respond. Kathleen, we wanted to talk about, how to distinguish our own value and how to actually experience it. And so we had I realized that the first steps, whenever I'm looking at the idea of transformation or change, I know that there are, we've talked about this many times, that there are basically three phases of that. There's awareness, and then there's process, and then there's relationship, and they're always going around together. We have a different relationship with something. And so I would say that valuing ourselves, there's a certain aspect of awareness. So we were looking at words like distinction, being able to value, not an assessment of like, well, I'm worth this much, but being able to actually distinguish the values, like the values of light and dark, the values of color, the value or the character. And so I'm just going to turn it over to you, because I think you have something to say about this, and I want to hear it.
Okay. Yeah, the one of the things that you're talking about is value not as a judgment of better than or less than, but value as the intrinsic essence that is a bit of life that needs to be expressed. So we need light, we need dark. One is not better than the other. They each have their own intrinsic essence that we need. And, this week, as I reflected on our conversation last week about claiming our value and worth and getting out of being jealous or envious and standing with ourselves, it just occurred to me how in all areas of our life, with our instruments, harp or whatever your instrument is, or in our relationships, part of where we get frozen is that we don't feel the worth and intrinsic value of where we are at any given moment in time. So, you're always saying in Hip Harp Academy, if all you can do is play one note, play it fully, heartfelt, expressively. Well, if all we can do in relationship is say, I'm scared right now, or I'm frozen, I don't know what to say, that there's value in starting where we are, and that the very thing that we want, which is to be distinguished in the sense of being seen by others and valued by others, actually has to start by our seeing and valuing ourselves, affirming our own intrinsic worth.
Yeah, and you were talking about that ahead of time before, and I noticed that I'm a performer and a composer, but I also have an academy where I'm teaching adult harpists, and many of whom are either coming to the harp, had a dream to play the harp, and they're doing it for the first time as an adult, or recovering classical harpists, people who went through that whole regime, but were not able to actually make that connection to themselves. And so, and to being able to speak their own creative truth, to self-express. And I remember when I first started playing the harp, and I was in my early 20s, and I wanted nothing more than to be like a real harpist. And everything that I felt wasn't a real harpist. I wanted to dress like a harpist. I wanted to carry around the little things that a harpist carried around. And I wanted to, in a sense, find a part of myself in that. And then after a while, that became a constraint. I realized that wasn't who I was, but I didn't know how to find who I was aside from kind of acting like other people for a while. I probably did. I probably, if I'd had direction, I could have seen that. But often I can't see myself, and I see that with the people who are in the academy as well. People who have incredible expertise in a field already. This is what I'm fascinated with, and are coming to the harp and often feeling like I need to become a good harpist. And I'm looking at them and thinking, I want to see what happens when you use the harp as a platform for showing and highlighting who you actually are. That's what's fascinating to me. And I realize that they often can't see. We all often can't see, but often it comes out of, what does somebody love?
Yeah, and that love, I believe, is an organic spiritual state, if we want to use that word, that we cannot create, that we can nurture it and cultivate a space for it to come, but it's and we can practice the arms of love: respect, acceptance, validation, gratitude, acknowledgement. But love, in the sense we're talking about, is just it's a state that arrives. And so, I mean, one of the things I started doing over the last several years is only learning to play songs on the harp that I loved. And how I realized what I loved is when I was in the car or at the gym, I would listen to different harp music and different harpists. And what I then found is, if a song was going through my head at a random time, then I knew that was the song for me to learn, because something in me resonated with it. It had stuck. And I think that there's something about love where things stick. And I'm circling back for a minute to something you said, because imitation is one of the greatest gifts of human beings, but it's one of the greatest curses. So when you wanted to become a harpist, you imitated the image of what you thought a harpist was. Then you realized imitating that image, or what Jungians would call a persona, a role, actually was constraining you, that it was too little. It wasn't allowing you, Deborah, to express yourself with the instrument. So then you redefined what it meant to be a harpist. And being a harpist for you became about expressing yourself via this instrument. And so there is something about our expressing ourselves, even again in our relationships, with how we say what we think, what we like, what we don't like, what we feel, what we want to feel, where we talk about our states of frozenness and coldness and our states of like high energy, that we can learn some skills or tools for doing that by imitating other people. But ultimately, we have to go within ourselves and be with whatever that energy is that wants expression, and play around with the tools until we find the conduit that's ours.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because I'm thinking, we talked a little bit about this before too. So finding that conduit, finding that thing that's ours, and by ours, I think means that we hear our own resonance when we do it. And I find with myself and with others, so I'm always looking at myself and my struggles with technology. Of the technology of anything that I'm learning how to do. I mean, I learned how to write for symphony orchestra as an adult. And so I was able to observe that process, and the feeling that I had that I am completely at sea. I'm incapable, and boom. And then now I can do it. There seems to be no, oh, I'm getting better. That doesn't seem how I do it. It's like incapable, boom. Oh, wow, that's a surprise. Somehow it clicks in. Sometimes I resonate. At some point, it's not resonating. That's another conversation. At some point, I have coordinated with it, with this new way of speaking. And the reason I said resonate is I want to go back. I was talking to a lawyer last night who claims to be not musical at all. And he was saying, okay, so seriously, do you really think I mean, that like I could, that I could have a voice with a harp, that I could, and I'm like, it is my belief. This is my belief. I build my school on this, that anyone can have and can share a peak musical experience if you can wed the level that you are at technically with the instrument and actually play at that level. And that's the hardest thing, because the minute and what I mean by that is, if you don't know how to play the harp, if you don't know how to play the harp, and you're just playing anything, and that is your technical level, and you listen to it and you're like, wow, this could go along with a story. I'm telling a story that's about rain, maybe, and it doesn't really matter. But if I can stay with that and really explore it, it could expand. At some point, I might think, oh, that's interesting. I can play with one finger, but what if I played with two? What would that do? What if I moved these things around? I don't know what they are, but what if I moved them around? If I started playing, then I could really move. I could be expressing myself. Now I might get frustrated with that after a while, and I might want to learn one more thing. And I'm thinking about my trajectory with the harp. So when I first started the harp, I learned to play harp music. Or maybe it wasn't like that. And then after a certain point, I was like, wait a second. Why can I not? This is strings. Why can I not play the blues? What would it take to play the blues? Is it notes? Is it just notes? Now I'm playing blues notes with a classical feeling. And my goal was, how can I have that feeling? How can I have that feeling? And how can I find the tools, and then how can I coordinate with it? So, and I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just thinking, I keep going back to this thing of there's an intrinsic value of your self-expression. There is a thing that you're trying to express through. It might just be your body through dance. It might just be your body through speaking. It might just be your voice through singing. You're trying to connect with that, and then you're hitting some walls. And then we start losing our value. We start losing, what am I trying to, who's in there that I'm trying to bring out? And what do I really need? And then I see people, including myself, get stuck in the technology. And we see other people who seem to be expressing themselves fabulously, and what we see is the complexity. This is me. This is what I see, and this is what I see other people. And so then I lose connection. What is my value? What am I bringing? And what is the least amount of technical complexity I can use in order to actually bring that value out?
Yeah, and I think, again, we're back to one of the key things, which is, at some point, your sense of confidence with your abilities at the harp freed you from the image of the collective harpist. And it allowed you then to get playful and to experiment. I'm always saying to my analysis, if you just think about life as a series of experiments. So you experiment. You say this, and you see what happens. You say it this way, you see what happens. You do this. If we can bring a curious, exploratory, playful attitude, then it allows us to find what in the outer world resonates with the inner. So you found the notes on the harp that resonated with the blues you heard in your head and felt in your body. And you valued that something in you, it had enough energy, enough psychic energy, there was enough there. It was like a fire that wanted expression, and so you moved with it. So part of how we value ourselves is we move with the inner fire. We really, when we have that kind of energy towards something, the desire, the impulse, as you talk about in the Strings of Passion, when we have it, then instead of thwarting it, talking ourselves out of it, telling ourselves that's no good, it'll never work, all those other demeaning things we said are, oh my God, I can't do that, this, and this bad will happen. We say, okay, wait a minute. How can I bring this fire into the world in a way that it'll be beautiful, that it will express something soulful that's inside of me that probably is inside of someone else in there in its own way. I mean,
as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that there's one big chasm here, and that is, it is going to sound bad, and it is going to look awkward, and it is I mean, I may be able to touch something beautiful, but I remember the first time I decided it would be so amazing if I was playing and then I went away and I danced and then came back. I mean, that'd be so amazing. And I remember doing it, and I was so awkward that it just looked bad. And because I was with other professionals, they were like, please never do that again. And the same thing with singing. It's the journey out, the values. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm contradicting myself.
Well, let me tell you what I'm hearing is that it looked bad according to the classical, stereotypic, professional musician. But maybe to the expressive arts therapist, it was beautiful.
Well,
bad in that regard is a subjective judgment that's still tied into the persona or the image you're trying to imitate. But that's part of the reality of the way the world works. So as we begin to express ourselves more, we need to be mindful that there is a time and a place for everything. And there's a time and a place to experiment and nurture something, the newborn. And then there's a time and a place to give expression. I mean, I'm thinking about, and Jamie, Ted Andrews in Animal Speak talks about this around one of the animals, which I'm not going to remember which one, of how the mother keeps the babies very secluded for the first 28 days. And how there's a time when we're giving birth to something that we need to keep it secluded from other people. That's just the way it is. It's the truth of newborn life in the physical body, and it's the truth of creative babies. And so because there are places where the creative baby or the literal human baby isn't wanted, is considered a distraction, inappropriate, a nuisance, all those negative things. But on the other hand, in the right environment, everyone loves a newborn baby, And so
I think what you just said, you said in the right environment. And I was thinking about and I'm always say to, the people in the academy, I'm like, everything's born slimy. Everything's born slimy. But I was thinking about, and we're, in this idea of how to value yourself. I'm thinking about two situations in which I brought out half-baked ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And this is and in two different environments, one which was set up for safety and one which was not set up for safety. And so in the first one, I had this idea for a piece, and it's called Catcher in the Rye, and it's a very powerful piece, and it's now, but when I was first developing, I knew how I wanted it, but I didn't know how to express it. And so I was doing it in a rehearsal, and I did the best I could. And there was a friend of mine in the first row, and she just went, and that was it. It was dead. It was out of I would not touch that thing for years. It took years later, I saw the person that I thought could bring it alive, and I did. I put it in Invention and Alchemy, and it's incredibly powerful. But it was years of lying underground because of that judgment. That's one thing. Here's an opposite example where the value was seen and shown to me. So in the first, the person was looking at this as a finished product and couldn't help me see the value. In the second, I was writing a show called Electra's Liar, and it was about the story of Electra and her transfer, and it doesn't matter. But I didn't even know what I was talking about, but I had this idea. And I wrote it out the best I could. I made it look like a play, but I knew nothing. I could barely, there was almost nothing on the page. And I remember when I handed it to my group, and it was a playwriting group that had rules about how they were going to give assessment. And I remember giving it to them with this just utter shame that I was handing them something that was so bad and so nothing. And yet the way that they looked at it, I was able to see what was there. And then there was a dramaturg in the audience who knew about ancient Greece. And she was like, look, the story you're telling, I can help you tell that story. And I was able to put that together in a very quick time. And like within
DHC, you froze.
Kathleen, you froze for a minute.
Yeah, and you froze also.
Okay, all right. So, and who knows what was happening on the other end. Let me see. Okay, and I think our chats might be cut off or something like that. I'm not sure. Maybe I've cut it, or maybe nobody's chatting with us, which is fine. But if you're there, if you can help us out by chatting, that'll help us see whether this system is working, this new system. Anyway, so what I was saying was these were two different situations that I was in which I was sharing something that I was creating. Somebody was actually, now you're frozen again. No, you're just being still and listening. Okay, great.
Okay.
Did I freeze again also? Right.
No, but you're
different situations.
The image is fuzzy. You know what? The unconscious is at work, because what happens when we lose connection to our value? Someone can hear us. Thank you. When we lose connection to our own value and the intrinsic worth of something, we freeze. Yeah. So the unconscious is mimicking that here with the outer world technology.
Great. Thank you. And then we can't see ourselves, and we can't see each other, and we can't connect. And then we kind of go on to ground. Oh, thank you. And the images are ping-ponging between fuzziness. Okay, so that's really interesting. It's choppy. Okay, good morning. Great, we're blurry. The voice is clear, the picture is fuzzy. Okay, oh, interesting. Okay, all right, well, eventually we'll see if we can just post the video, the fuzzy video, the audio. Thank you for listening. And feel free to ask questions. We're happy to try that. We're still experimenting with this, but carry on, Kathleen. So these are happening all the time. We can't see our value. What does it take for us to? I know that in the second situation in which my value was seen and shown to me and then enhanced, there were guidelines here. There were guidelines that this organization followed that were like and they were, we're going to read this as if it is a great play. And then the second thing is there is going to be a round of feedback, and the first round is going to be only the positive. No matter what we think, only the positive. Only if you and then you, the author, get to ask questions about clarity. So first, we treat it with value. Second, we highlight the values that we experienced in it.
Mm-hmm.
Third, we allow you to ask questions about clarity. And only if you are ready are we going to offer our opinions. And you can stop us at any time. And then the second, and then the second one where I was cut, where I lost my connection, it went straight to value. Straight to, I don't value this. This isn't good. And almost completely unconscious by someone.
Yeah, and again, in those two situations, the group that nurtured Electra's liar, they were working with the value, the intrinsic worth of what was there, not the value judgments of good, bad, polished, unpolished. They were working with the value of intrinsic worth. And the situation with Catcher in the Rye, that first person was looking at it from the value of a marketable product or a performable product. So we're looking also at the two different kinds of valuing that goes on in the world. You know, part of what's going through my mind is an analysis of mine one day was talking about something she's been struggling with, and she all of a sudden laughed, and she said, you know, did you ever see the Bob Newhart episode where he's with this woman in his office, and it's the end of the day, and she's going on and on complaining about something she always does, and he just stands up and he says, stop it, just stop it, stop doing it, stop it. And it's kind of a joke between her and I, and that sometimes when that part of us that wants to jumps automatically to valuing as evaluative, good, bad, right, wrong, perfectionistic, slimy, we just have to say to it, stop it. We're not going down that path. Here we are, the fork in the road. We got at least three ways to go. I'm not going down that path because I know where it leads. But I'm going to go down here and say, okay, what matters in here to me? Where is the worth of this endeavor? What is the essence, the purpose of it? What is it on a feeling level I'm wanting to connect with? And when we can back up to that, then it's amazing how people come forth to help us, like the woman in the audience who was a Greek expert on Greek myth and story and could help you flesh that out. I mean, now I'm thinking about one of my favorite quotes by Goethe, which I have calligraphied, and it hangs on the wall in my great room right at my kitchen where I see it every day. But Goethe, who was a learned doctor and alchemist way back in the day, I think it was 1600s. We'd have to Google the exact date. He wrote, until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back regarding all acts of initiative and creation. But once one is committed, then providence moves too. A whole stream of events issues forth. Whatever you dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. That's what we're talking about. That's how you value yourself, is you have the courage to take action on the dream. And the dream may be to get back into dating and being able to say to a partner, hey, that works for me, that doesn't. That may be the boldness that's needed. The boldness that's needed may be putting your hands on the instrument and expressing in a different way. But it goes back to that movement towards intrinsic worth. And I suppose now we have to deal with and pull up the weeds and the briars in our psyche where we believe we don't have that. And, you know, I have a belief in the innate goodness and the innate creative spirit of all of us. And I have a belief that innate within us is the divine core that everything else flows from. So I also think as we're going to value ourselves, we really have to look at what do we really believe deep down about ourselves and human nature. Because if we believe human nature and deep down our essence is bad and wrong, then we're going to have a hard time valuing ourselves.
That's interesting.
So,
because I'm thinking there's so many things that came out there. Evaluate, phases of valuing, and what do I value? And I think, as you were just speaking now, I struggle with perfectionism, and I know a lot of the people I work with struggle with perfectionism, and perfectionism is often about hiding what's wrong rather than bringing it out. And as you were talking, I also realized, first of all, evaluating. I'm going to have to look that word up, because that seems to be valuing versus evaluating seems to be at the heart of this. And I know that in the academy, and also in my work with my teachers, my teacher Tony had something called the half bake, and it was where you could you were expressing an idea. It was understood it was going to look like crap, because that's not what it was about. It was about express it any way you can so that others can feed back to you. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what's beautiful in that. Here's what, or not even evaluating like beautiful, like, and that's what happened in this session. I gave nothing to them, just a little bit, just what I did have, and they were able to help me see what was there. So phases of valuing and being able to be with someone, like the big thing that I do in the academy, when there's coaching every week, and every week my job, the first part of my job is to show people this is what you are doing, to help them see this is what is working. This is what you're not seeing. This is what you're not valuing, but I can value it because of my experience. I can see it and I can show it to you and I can share it, because I don't think you're a jerk. I think you're amazing and have something to share with the world that nobody else can share. And so having safe places and that kind of attitude is great. And I really want to look at that evaluation and see that. I just want to look at that word and break it apart and see what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm thinking again about how sometimes we do need the evaluative processes, but there's a time and a place. And if the evaluative processes do not affirm the value, I'm thinking about, I'm working on a book entitled Emerging from the Darkness, Alchemical Transformation Through the Scriptures. And I've been working with a transformational book coach and editor. So Nirmala, if you happen to be looking, thank you. And as I was writing my proposal and I'd written the chapter abstracts, she wrote me back and she said, frankly, these are boring. and I went, gulp. And 3 or 4 days later, she wrote back and she said something to these weren't the exact words, but something to the effect of, I know my feedback might have been harsh. She said the abstracts were boring, but your project is not. And your book is very exciting to me and has this life. And so it took me 2 or 3, 4 months to digest that before I could circle back. But when I circled back and redid the abstract, I felt the difference. There was heart, there was feeling. I wasn't hiding between a sterile, academic, clinical, jargony, technique-like persona. And so, and I think that there's a time and a place for both. But if we jump to evaluation without being able to hold on to the intrinsic worth and value, the life force, then that's when we do damage. And so there's a time and a place for both, just like in your creative feedback group.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying about phases of when we're going to evaluate and what we're going to evaluate. And we have a question here. I think I can literally bring it up. I'm just going to try it. And there's no name on it. So it's...
Oh, good.
I know. I've had to struggle with my inner critic, both in performance on the harp and in novel writing. And I have found just simply and firmly saying no to it, like you would to a small child, goes a long way in helping to reclaim my own authority over it. That's great. Like taking that action word, saying no, that's great. Do you want to say anything more about that, Kathleen? And what happened to our...
I often I often say to myself and to other people, it's so important that we say the creative no so we can say the creative yes. So, in saying the creative no, that's what you're saying, the creative no to the inner child. And the other thing that for me works sometimes is
Wait a
that
minute.
little part of me.
Do you mean saying no to the inner child or the inner critic?
The inner child that's scared and wanting to hide in the closet. And so then I might say to her, you know what, you can go play. You don't have to do this. The adult me is going to do this. This is not a place where you, this inner child in me, has to be in charge.
Can you give me an example of that? I'm struck by it seems to be different than what the person said, but I love both of them, and I want to get both of them in my. I want to.
Yeah, well, I put my own projections onto saying no, like you would to a small child, to the child in me that gets scared and would cause me to hide. Children when they're scared. Well, not just children. One of the basic the three basic responses to fear, fight, flight, or freeze. So the flight is hiding.
Wait, what about hide?
Well, flight is hiding. When we run away, the fleeing is the hide, is hiding. Okay. So flight, fight, or freeze. And so, there are parts of us that, well, let me say it this way. We can never change our history. Our history, what we experienced as a child, we experienced. Somewhere there's a cellular memory of it. But what we can do is, as we build a conscious relationship to that cellular memory, is we can begin then to differentiate that from current reality. So by saying no to the part that the child that might be scared and want me to hide, what we are doing is we're affirming, here as an adult woman, I have the resources and access to the resources and support I need to move forward. I didn't have that as a child. That just is.
Yeah, I want to bring something out. Two things. I mean, this is fascinating to me because as you're talking about this, I'm thinking we actually can go back and change the past. And we can't change the past. We can change our experience of the past in the present. And in that way, it's not lording over us anymore. I wanted to bring these two things. How is the inner critic related to the inner child? Because I'm having this funny feeling as you're talking that there's some kind of connection there.
Well, I think that for me, for most people I've worked with over the last 30 years, and again, there are always exceptions. So this is as a general rule, the critic is rooted in some learned pattern of defending oneself. So if one begins to criticize oneself, then it is an attempt to mitigate outer world criticism. So for me and what I've observed with most people, the critic is actually tied or rooted in childhood experiences where the mechanism of internal criticism got developed as a defense against outer world criticism and rejection.
Yeah, or even as a learned, like this is how you respond. This is how as an adult you should respond to that. Whack yourself or whatever it is. Interesting. So that means that the inner critic is actually very connected to the inner child. I'm pushing on this because I'm so fascinated by the person who wrote saying, I say no to my inner critic. And then you were saying, I say no to my inner child. I say, no, you don't have to do this. And I'm just finding that really, this connection is opening up the idea of how are those two things related.
Yeah. I mean, and someone's writing, yes, to preempt the criticism, you internalize it. And that's right. And again, we can't change what happened in the outer world for us when we were a child, but we can change our internal relationship to it. And that's what we're talking about, shifting by beginning to say no, like to a small child, where it's loving and affirming. It's not rejecting of the child, but it is a firm no about the behavior. So here we are at the crossroads, and we have this newly born, slimy, creative baby, or this attempt to speak our truth in relationship, and we can go down the road of criticizing ourselves and hiding, or we can go down the road of valuing ourselves and experimenting playfully to find the right words.
Something's happening to some there, so I may ask you to say that again. And I don't know, is it happening to me too? But what I'm really, I'm having this epiphany right now as we're talking about. Oh, am I moving now? So I'm having this epiphany, and whether it's going on this or not, the epiphany that I'm having is we cannot go back the events of the past. But the events of the past are not traumatizing us. It's how we internalized it and then continue to whack once as a kid. It's over, but it's not over in what I continue to myself. And so and I'm just feeling like I'm changing the past impact on me when I make a new relationship and when I start to value myself, see those values that are in me rather than reacting to my fear of criticism or my perfectionism or however it is that I am hiding and flighting and, fleeing and freezing and all of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of my favorite quote. Go ahead. I was just going to say,
no,
it makes me think of my favorite quote. Yeah. My favorite quote from Jung, that by building a conscious relationship to the unconscious, we mitigate the negative effects of the unconscious. So we don't change our history, but by relating to it differently, it mitigates any of the negative impact that it has on us now in this moment. Because really what we want is we're wanting to value ourselves so that we can be ourselves in this moment in time, to show really up now.
Right. I'm so moved by what you just said about that past. I know there's in 12-step literature that's about, one of the promises is we will not regret the past or seek to change it, and we will see that everything that has happened to us can be for the good of others. And what I heard you say there, and this takes me back to Sleeping Beauty. All the fairies give bad things are going to happen, or all the things that fairies are going to have good things. And then the bad fairy comes in and says, and she's going to die. The next fairy comes in and cannot change that. You can't change that, but can mitigate it.
Yeah.
That she will only fall asleep, as so many of us do. And yet, the kiss of love, or, whatever it is, that will bring her back.
Yes. And I think that we're getting to a good place to wrap up. And there's another comment I'd like to, if you want to bring it up, to share in a minute. But, I think that it is that kiss of love that we're talking about with valuing ourselves. And this is so true with what our viewer is saying, that Einstein and Jung said, and this is Jung's transcendent function, that you can't resolve a problem in the same state of consciousness in which it's conceived. You have to get above it or below it. And so again, we're talking about getting into a different relationship with it. And as this said, acceptance of it without allowing it control seems to untie a knot. That there's so much value in accepting and being in conscious relationship to it. And it is so true, again, as this next user is saying, that the 13th fairy put the curse on Sleeping Beauty because she wasn't invited to the party. And so it is amazing. Yeah. So that it's when we try and keep these parts of us out that they act out. It's that when we can accept them and meet them and say, okay, here you are. Now what? And again, if it's like, that doesn't mean it gets to be in charge. You know, the parting image that I want to leave with this today is, I love the image of having a conference room in my heart where all these parts of me get to come. So the part of me that gets critical, the little child that gets scared and wants to hide, the part of me that hides behind an academic clinical persona, the part of me that wants to just be this spontaneous, wide open woman in the moment and not worry about what anybody, they all get a place at the table in the conference room of my heart, and then we see what happens. But no one gets to be in charge on their own. It's got to be a team effort. And that imagery to me is really helpful for what we're talking about, because inviting that part to the conference room of our heart automatically says, okay, you have something of value to say, and now let's just help it find the proper, or the healthy, proper being healthy place.
Okay, I love the conference room of the heart. And what I would love, what I'm going to leave with today, share with others, is the touch and the kiss of love, and to know that there are parts of me that have gone to sleep or they're hiding, and that touch and that kiss of love, of valuing rather than evaluating, valuing, even if I don't see what they are yet, to live in that feeling of valuing is what I want to take on.
Yes. Yes.
So Kathleen, thank you again. And thank you everyone for being here and, being in a technology that may connect us at some points and disconnect us at other points, but that, that's okay, because we still get to be together in this way. And thank you for exploring this with me. This is going to change how I go through this next week. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, Kathleen.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Great. And thanks everyone for being here. Bye-bye.